If you can walk into a room and know something feels off before anyone says a word, here is the question nobody asks. Are you unusually good at reading people? Or has your brain become unusually good at predicting danger? Because those can feel exactly the same. And if you confuse one for the other, you can spend years calling it intuition while slowly losing trust in everyone around you. By the end of this video, I'll give you a simple 3-signal test for knowing when to trust your read and when to keep your interpretation open. Start with this. You are not literally reading minds. You are reading patterns. Tone changes, timing, eye contact, contradictions. The way somebody treats you when they want something versus when they don't. Your brain takes tiny pieces of information and tries to predict what happens next. Sometimes it gets that prediction spectacularly right. You meet someone everyone loves, yet something feels wrong. 6 months later, the behavior finally becomes obvious to everyone else. And that experience can make you think, I knew it. I always know. But here is where things get dangerous. Being sensitive to signals is not the same as being correct about what those signals mean. A person looks away when you share good news. Jealousy? Maybe. Or distraction, anxiety, a headache, bad timing. One signal can tell you to pay attention. It cannot tell you the whole story. This is why the most useful people reading skill isn't detecting more clues. It's separating observation from interpretation. Observation? She congratulated me, then immediately changed the subject. Interpretation? She secretly wants me to fail. Those are not the same sentence. And the more socially alert you are, the easier it becomes to collapse them into one. That constant scanning can also help explain why social situations become exhausting. If part of your attention is always checking tone, facial expression, status, tension, hidden meaning, and what might happen next, you're not only having a conversation, you're monitoring the conversation. Researchers do study a trait called sensory processing sensitivity, differences in how strongly and deeply people respond to environmental information. But sensitivity is not a diagnosis, and it isn't evidence that somebody possesses a built-in lie detector. Research on anxiety also shows that attention can become increasingly biased toward possible threats, and that creates a strange paradox. The harder you search for hidden danger, the easier it can become to find danger inside ambiguous information. So how do you know when your intuition actually deserves your trust? Use 3 signals: cue, pattern, cost, first. Cue. What did you actually observe without adding a motive? Not, he disrespected me. Try, he interrupted me 3 times and dismissed my answer. Not, she is fake. Try, she agrees with me privately, then contradicts me in front of other people. Facts first, story second, pattern. Has it happened repeatedly? People have bad days, they get awkward, they miss texts, they say clumsy things. A pattern is different. A pattern survives different days, moods and situations. One strange interaction is data. Repeated behavior is evidence. And third, cost. What happens to you when this pattern continues? Do they repeatedly break promises, ignore boundaries, reveal private information, only contact you when they need something? Say one thing, then consistently do another. Now you're no longer trying to decode a 5-second facial expression. You're evaluating behavior. That distinction matters, because facial expressions and vibes can be difficult to interpret accurately. Even micro-expression recognition is challenging enough that researchers specifically train people to improve it. Consistent behavior gives you much better information. So remember this: one signal, notice. two signals, observe. Repeated signals with a real cost, respond. Maybe that response is a boundary. Maybe it's less access. Maybe it's a direct conversation. Sometimes it's leaving. But here's the important part. You don't need to invent someone's hidden motive to justify protecting yourself from their visible behavior. And that brings us to the trap that catches perceptive people. Certainty. Your friend takes 6 hours to answer. Your brain says they're pulling away. Then they cancel plans. I knew it. Now every delayed reply becomes additional proof. Maybe they really are pulling away. But maybe work is chaotic. Maybe they're struggling. Maybe the friendship is changing. Maybe something completely unrelated is happening. Here's where perception can turn into a trap. Once you become emotionally invested in being the person who always sees through people, changing your mind starts to feel like losing part of your identity. So instead of investigating your prediction, you start defending it. Every new fact gets forced to support the original verdict. Research on social cognition has found something fascinating here. People experiencing high social anxiety can sometimes assign too much meaning to other people's thoughts and emotions, a tendency sometimes described as excessive mentalizing. Feeling hyper-aware, in other words, does not automatically mean you're more accurate. That's the part the human lie detector story leaves out. Your internal alarm system can produce false positives. And false positives have consequences. If every awkward pause means rejection, every delayed reply means disrespect, every confident person is manipulative, and every imperfect friend is fake, eventually you solve the problem of being disappointed by people by never getting close enough to anybody to be disappointed. At first that can feel like peace. Eventually it can start feeling like loneliness. So yes, withdrawal can sometimes be useful. Quiet can reset you. A few reciprocal relationships may suit you better than dozens of draining ones. But there's a massive difference between choosing your circle and deciding nobody deserves entry. A boundary says, I need consistency. A fortress says, everyone eventually betrays you. A boundary says, I'm leaving this conversation because you're disrespecting me. A fortress says, I already know what everyone is secretly thinking. The goal isn't to become less observant, it's to become more accurate. And there's a surprisingly simple way to practice that. For 1 week, keep a prediction log. Every time your alarm bells go off, write down 3 things. What did I actually observe? What do I predict it means? What happened next? Do not grade yourself on whether you felt something. Grade yourself on what actually happened. You might discover your instincts are extremely useful around certain patterns, broken promises, boundary pushing, sudden affection immediately before somebody asks for something, people whose words repeatedly fail to match their behavior. But maybe your instincts are less accurate around other things. Quiet people. Delayed messages, unfamiliar personalities, awkward facial expressions. People who simply communicate differently from you. That's valuable information because instead of worshipping your intuition, you're calibrating it. And when the relationship actually matters, add one more step. Ask a clean question before making a dirty assumption. You got quiet when I mentioned that. Did something land wrong? You've cancelled twice. Do you still want to make plans? Then pay attention to what happens next, not just their explanation, their behavior afterward. A healthy person may explain, clarify, apologize, or even disagree with you. But unhealthy patterns usually become easier to identify with time because words and actions keep separating. And that might be the biggest shift in how you think about reading people. The strongest people reader isn't the person who claims they can see through everyone, it's the person who notices early, stays curious, checks the pattern, and changes their conclusion when the evidence changes. You don't need to ignore your intuition. You need to calibrate it, because peace doesn't come from assuming everybody is fake. Peace comes from knowing you can notice what is real, question what is uncertain, set a boundary when necessary, and still leave enough room for good people to surprise you. So the next time your internal alarm says something is off, use the 3-signal test: cue, pattern, cost. Then ask yourself one final question. Do I have evidence, or do I have a prediction? That question can save you from the wrong people, and it can stop you from pushing away the right ones. Try the 3-signal test the next time your instincts fire. If it changes how you read the situation, come back and tell me which signal made the difference.